Out of the blue, like I had not heard anything about this. Amazon just randomly, and I think I was on Twitter at the time, announced, "Hey, cloud gaming, that's going really well for Google. Let's get into it as well." So they're also offering the ability to stream games to PC and Mac. And then actually really interesting, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, they're also talking about getting it onto iPhones and iPads, but using a really different mechanism to get it on there. That I think is insanely clever. And a huge difference compared to Google Stadia, which, just to remind everyone, it's not available in Australia, so that's why we don't have it. You have to have your subscription to Stadia, but then buy games on Stadia, which I think is completely the opposite of what people thought it would work. Whereas Amazon Luna is sort of a subscription, and then you can also get subscriptions to, I think they're calling it channels. So you sort of can have I think they're talking about a Ubisoft channel, which might be interesting to you, where, you can get all the Ubisoft games through that channel, rather than just like buying them. I don't even know. I haven't seen something where it says you can buy the games. I'm not sure if you know that.
No, I haven't read that myself. Just the fact
Yeah.
that, essentially you got a subscription to these channels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess through a lot of the recent development in hardware that they've been doing with Alexa and all these kind of things, they've also got, very similar to Google Stadia, Alexa-enabled Luna controller, which also does the whole thing of it connects to your Wi-Fi and like which is actually really smart to connect it directly, because that just cuts down on latency, and that's going to be a huge issue for cloud gaming in general. And I think where Amazon has a massive advantage is they own Twitch. I don't know if everyone remembers this, but they own Twitch. So they're going to have a lot of Twitch integration. So that's one thing that, could bring it to life a lot more. I feel like, I know that YouTube has that with Google Stadia, and I don't think it's live yet, but I think people who are willing to jump into games, you're much more likely to do that on Twitch than you are YouTube. For me personally, I wouldn't watch YouTube and then go, "Oh yeah, I'm going to jump into a game with this creator." Whereas with Twitch, that the relationship you have with the creator is a bit different. And, I could really see that. Imagine Among Us. And then they're sort of like, "Hey, I need 5 people. Bang, whoever subscribers or, gives me a donation can jump in." I could see that happening. That could actually be pretty neat. So yeah, like what do you think about this?
So, I mean, this had been a low industry rumor for a while.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
But I will agree that, like, I hadn't heard, like, no one was talking about it in like the last 6 months. People, when Amazon made the big push into, they started a studio and they started releasing, some games. Some of them haven't gone so well. They've actually taken them off sale and things. So they obviously started putting a lot of feelers out, started to really get into there. Obviously, they purchased Twitch, which we talked about a while back. So there was always that rumor of, well, you've got the three big kind of people that would do this. Google, which obviously Stadia, Microsoft, which we know their hand at this point, and Amazon was the third that people were like, they're going to do this, but we don't know anything about it. But it did feel like it came out of nowhere. It felt like, what a weird kind of time to do it. I don't know if it's got a lot of buzz yet. Stadia kind of felt like it was a big drop at the time. This feels a lot less. And I wonder if that's because a lot of people just are maybe over the whole thing about streaming games. I don't know. I'm very, as an Australian, I'm always looking at these from afar, being like, "Oh, that's cool. One day, maybe, one day, maybe they'll bring it to us, or we'll have the infrastructure to support it for the majority of what they need, to make the money back and whatever." But yeah, it is good though that they've come out, like, so the Amazon's channel, which I think is Luna Plus, it's got some good titles on there already, like RE7, Control, things like that, and they're saying it's like six US a month.
Yeah.
Which
I think that's just introductory though. I think that's going to go up by like 30-40%. I wouldn't be surprised if that's more like $9.99 a month eventually.
So it's still unknown to me, is that kind of model what people are looking at for streaming games. We know Game Pass, we know that kind of model for like a Game Pass style setup, which isn't streaming. although they're going to incorporate that, works, but we don't know if this works yet 100%.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
it's
interesting
interesting.
because like there's a few things to unpack there that you just mentioned. Being in Australia, because our infrastructure is so terrible due to really, I don't know, without getting too political, but I think you can just say by facts that we've dropped so low in the internet rankings around the world. Like the average speed you can get in an Australian household compared to the rest of the world, we're like 70th or 80th now, which is just ridiculous for a country that tries to be purportedly in the top 20 on most metrics. And you're quite fortunate. I think you're in a really good spot where you actually get ridiculously good internet, and I get pretty good internet as well. So we're probably two people that can't complain as much as others. But it's bad because across the board, it's just so flaky that I've got friends at work who their internet drops out all the time during the day. So like during calls and everything, and video calls. If you're one of their major players, Australia's 2% of the world's GDP, right? So if you're a major player and you're looking at it and going, there's so many issues down there, you're just not going to bother. Like you're going to have to really want it and really care about it and, either maybe not be aware of it even, you know what I mean? Aware of the issues. And also you need to set up servers in Australia. Like you have to leverage the servers in Australia for this kind of stuff. It's not going to work, bouncing it off the States because already the latency on these kind of services is pretty bad. But, we will jump into a story later around xCloud and some discussions around that. But also, there was some recent announcements from the Australian government that actually, hopefully, in the long term, will help us. Just to boil it down really quickly, in South Korea, pretty much every connection that you have, or the vast majority of connections, are fiber optic all the way through up to your household or dwelling. Whereas in Australia, they were going to do that, and then at the change of government, they actually got rid of that plan. So they've laid cable almost all the way around, but then the last little part of the connection, they've used the old technologies like copper or whatever was in the ground. Now, even I looked at this. You could actually quote the government. You could actually go to a government agency and ask them for a quote to connect it all the way to your house. And some people have done this. And it's cost them like $20,000, $30,000 to do it. But some people, they just could not get onto the internet properly and they need that for their business for whatever reason. And now the government has actually announced that they're going to have a system where it's like a really weird way they've described it, but it's by 2023 that by demand. So it's when a customer says, hey, I want a better plan or a higher speed. So this is like gigabyte speeds, that because it's an on-demand basis, they'll go out and for much more nominal costs, I think they're talking about like $1,000 or something like that, they'll actually connect your house and route it all through your street. And it seems like a very ad hoc way to do it. So I'm like keeping a really sharp eye on it because I definitely will do it. Like I'll submit it straight away. I'll pay $1,000 to get like the best connection I can, even though I have already pretty good connection. But I do hope like this kind of stuff with time will sort of help really get us back into the modern world from an internet perspective. But yeah, like I literally saw this pop up on Twitter and like pretty much instantly. And then I actually clicked it to subscribe, to register for this service. And it's US only at the moment.
What a surprise.
I know. And I was thinking, you know what, this is just like not going to happen in Australia.
So I've got two big thoughts about this then.
Yeah, go on.
So first is I think this will live or die on the Twitch integration and how well
agree.
they leverage that.
Agree.
So that is to me going to be, what makes the difference. And the second is this. Pretty much at this point, this kills Stadia. Like, if it wasn't already dead, this is the killer, isn't it? Like, not xCloud, it's Amazon.
And I think I had a joke in my own notes, basically like Stadia tried to kill itself, but it's basically this has just tipped it over the edge. But yeah, like Stadia, it never clicked with people. It never made sense to people. I've already heard people's reactions to this. I guess like for something like this, as long as you're not getting negative reactions, I think that's the most important thing. Because I think you're 100% right. I think, and I really hope they do something a little bit different, which is, let's just say you're an Amazon Prime member and you're on Twitch. So you're already a Twitch Prime member as well. like my example before about the Among Us thing. Imagine if a creator or a streamer could go, "Hey, I want to get 5 people on," and you could do like maybe a limited time trial of Luna on your
Hmm.
PC, and then it lives and dies by how good it works, right? And if it works really well, and I have a lot of, just full disclosure, I have a lot of Amazon Web Services. Like I use a lot of their services. And to me, they're so much better than Google and everything else out there. Like they have worked this thing out so well that
In
I actually have a lot of faith that they'll get this working well. I mean, look at
in
Twitch. Twitch dominates everything else from a live streaming point of view. Like nothing works as well as Twitch.
in Stadia's
So,
defense, the
mm,
technology, like, because I've watched a lot of comparisons, especially between Stadia and XCloud,
yeah.
or whatever Xbox are calling it these days, cloud gaming, streaming, or whatever.
Yeah, even
Um,
Phil Spencer still calls it xCloud, even though
yeah.
officially they're saying don't call it that. It's funny.
So, and the Stadia, like, especially like obviously people testing this in the US and probably got very good, connections in that. Like the tech behind Stadia, like apparently, it works really well. So
Yeah.
they've just
When
kind
it
of they've
works, right?
no, look, I've from the tech side, I've heard very good things. Not maybe not for every game. There's times
Mm,
when I think I've heard Destiny can get a little bit tricky because that game is very twitchy and things like that.
yeah.
But the problem is like the whole approach, as you said before, about having to buy games. Now I know you get some free games as a Stadia Pro, whatever they call this, their paid subscription, but you're like it was at odds with what people were expecting, as you said. As opposed to what Amazon are doing with this subscription service. That feels much closer to what I think people were wanting, but
Yeah, I
we
agree.
don't know. We don't know. It's maybe no one wants streaming in general. Who knows?
Well, I'm not a big fan of it, at all. But I'm very out of the mainstream, really, to be honest. Like, I always buy physical if I can. Like, and I regret it. We talk about this offline a lot. Like, I almost regret getting Smash Brothers physically because then I have to change it out and do all that. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, it'd be so much quicker and easier if I had it digitally. So for me, I don't know, streaming, just the idea that it's like, hey, if my internet goes down, okay, sorry, I can't play it. It's like, it just sucks, I just couldn't be bothered. Like, but I get that I'm way out of the norm for that sort of, thought pattern. I think for most people, like you're saying, where I've seen the same thing. Like I have seen where Stadia hasn't worked well for people, but when it works well, if it's not a twitchy game, like all the sort of Eurojank games that you've been talking about, I could imagine them being completely fine streaming, you
Yeah.
know? And like, get away from the Dark Souls kind of games, very accurate kind of games, Rocket League, those type of games. And honestly, a lot of games I like. Yeah, I could see it working. And for me, again, just to reiterate, I really think does it work well? Is it pretty seamless? And is it easy to get in? And your point around the streamers, like, can you just bang, click something, jump in the game, and then see yourself in their stream?
Hmm.
That's really powerful, man. And I could imagine it being really useful for small streamers. The folk who have like 20 people who are following them. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's like, hey, I'm about to play Among Us. Let's jump in. Like a lot of people would want to do that, and they love that kind of interaction. So yeah, I think that's how it's going to take off if it does take off. But I still kind of go back to xCloud, and it just seems to me, if you're in the Xbox ecosystem, or like me, have a PC and then maybe subscribe to Game Pass one day, just having it as an option, it just feels like, why would you ever then get an extra one on top of that? You know what I mean? Just to me doesn't make sense.
So there is an aspect of streaming that we'll talk about the xCloud that I am excited about. That is not new, but we'll
Yeah.
get to that when we get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. And the last thing I just wanted to say on this before we moved on is that the controller for Luna, when I saw it, I actually legit thought they'd done a deal with Nintendo to like take the design and then just like rebrand it, and they've paid them a lot of money or something like that. Like that's honestly, no joke, was my gut reaction. And I even did like a morph image between the two controllers, and they're so similar. And I know people are like, oh, there's no other way to do it. I don't know, just like the design language of it, it just looks so similar. I was like, well, they've taken what I think is one of the best controllers out there, so I can't hate them too much.
It's really interesting that we've almost got to the point where there is a standard design for a controller. Sony's still pushing that envelope. But Xbox, Xbox and the Pro Controller are very similar. It's like we're almost at that point where that is the standard now. It's really
Well, it is at the moment, right?
Yeah.
But then I'd fully expect Nintendo to break that again, because that's what they do. But yeah, apart from the off-axis thing, it's like there is like almost pretty much a standard. Like I would have loved if PlayStation actually moved to off-axis, like same as Xbox. That would have been really cool. It would have been funny to just see people's reactions.
Oh
All
man,
the
people would
Xbox
have been
fanboys
pissed.
going, "We win!
People
We
would have
said
been
we were right all along." All right, well let's get into some smaller news.